Now, let's talk about a woman who is undergoing a rather dramatic rebrand. Kamala Harris is being presented by the Democrats and the US media as a vibrant and visionary, completely competent presidential candidate. Just look at the cover of this is New York Magazine. It's incredible. It is real. A lot of people think this is some sort of a parody. There's Kamala sitting on top of a giant coconut, surrounded by celebrating Democrat heavyweights, Pelosi, Obama. You can see Beyonce and George Clooney, I think, there as well. Douglas, are you excited for the Camelot era?
It's amazing what can happen in a few weeks, isn't it, Rita? I mean, when you and I last spoke, Joe Biden was still staggering on, pretending he had another 4.5 more years in him. And everyone in the legacy media, with a few noble exceptions, was saying, absolutely, this guy is the future. He may be 81, but he's the future. And we won't hear any talk to the contrary. Now, of course, Joe Biden is already the past and has been clearly unceremoniously ditched at the behests of leaders of his own party. And now the whole story has to change. So again, when you and I last spoke, Rita, Kamala Harris was one of the most foot-in-mouth politicians of our era, a person of very few discernible talents and who had absolutely all the qualities of leadership apart from followers. And now, what a difference a few weeks makes. Because now, of course, there's New York Magazine and all those same legacy media, again, with a few noble exceptions, are seriously trying to push Kamala on the not just American public, but the world public as the savior of the republic. And it's quite a sight to behold. These are long weeks in politics these days. There's several months until the election. Goodness knows what will happen in the meantime. But I reckon that this varnish and gloss and razzmatazz that the Democrat loyal media are trying to push is not really going to stick. I think it's going to wear off pretty fast.
I think so. And at the same time, they've tried to bury what happened with Trump and the attempted assassination. Yes. It's almost like that has already been memory hold, and you would expect so much more coverage and scrutiny about what happened that day, the many failures of the Secret Service and local authorities to allow that to happen the way it did. But Douglas, there seems to be very little interest in pursuing that story from the bulk of the media.
Well, it's not just the story of that, Rita, but I think it's the story also of what led up to it. I mean, the only person responsible for this, so far as we know at the moment, is the gunman. And his motives are still being looked into by the intelligence services and so on. But the thing that strikes me is, in the run-up to that attempted assassination of former President Trump, leading Democrats, including Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, were all, again, with their amen chorus in the media, saying, this is going to be the last election you can vote in. This is a vote, on democracy. This is an election about democracy and whether we get the chance to ever vote again. And by the way, women, you're all going to be sold into servitude, and all of these white supremacists like J.D. Vance and his wife are all going to kill you all the time. And they were doing that right up until the day of the attempted assassination. There were a few hours of merciful silence and decency, and now they're back at it again. They are back at it again. And, you and I have talked about this before, Rita. If you think and keep saying and don't think, but just say it anyway, as I say, that Donald Trump is Hitler and it's going to be the Fourth Reich if he gets a second term in power, it's not surprising if somebody is going to decide that the great fantasy of going back in time and killing Hitler is now your opportunity and you can do it. Yes. We know because this had happened in 2016 when a young British man tried to seize a gun from a policeman at a Trump rally in order to try to shoot then candidate Trump. Nobody toned down the rhetoric in the years since. If anything, they ramped it up. And if this were any other scenario, Rita, there wouldn't just be a focus on the gunman. There would be a focus on all the people that made these hyperbolic and histrionic claims for years. And people will be saying, why don't we tone it down a bit? Why don't we stop pretending that, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are white supremacist Hitlerites, and just recognize there are other Americans with a different vision of where we're going in America, and they need to be taken on for their arguments. But no, oh no. The ability to do that lasted a few minutes some Saturdays ago, and now they're back at it. And I think it's shameful, for one. I don't think it's a discourse that should be in politics, because at the end of the day, the people who made those arguments have been in what should be a much stickier position, because they're saying, this guy is Hitler, but I'm sorry he wasn't killed. Well, good luck holding on to those two ideas at the same time. Good luck.
And you are so right. That reckless rhetoric started within minutes, literally within minutes. Some people held out for a few hours, but they're all back at it now. Now, we've seen the Biden administration being consistent, to say the least, when it comes to America's support of Israel in its war against Hamas. What sort of Middle East policy would we see under a Kamala Harris administration? The Vice President gave us an insight after her meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. She told the Israeli Prime Minister the war must come to an end, and vowed to not be silent about suffering in Gaza. And in what CNN called a notable moment, Harris concluded her remarks by telling reporters that the war in Gaza is not a binary issue.
It is important for the American people to remember the war in Gaza is not a binary issue. However, too often the conversation is binary, when the reality is anything but. So I ask my fellow Americans to help encourage efforts to acknowledge the complexity, the nuance, and the history of the region. Let us all condemn terrorism and violence. Let us all do what we can to prevent the suffering of innocent civilians, and let us condemn anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and hate of any kind.
Douglas, what do you make of those comments?
I mean, it's first of all, of course, it's tip-top advice from Vice President Harris, isn't it? She said to Benjamin Netanyahu that the war should end. I'm sure that's absolutely fresh to him. He must be surprised that's never occurred to him or anyone in his government. Everybody wants the war to end. But, what is Kamala's plan to get back the hostages, including the American hostages that are held by Hamas and other Islamic militants in Gaza? What's her plan to get them back? She's weirdly silent about it. What is her great expertise in warfare? Or indeed in anything much, to start lecturing an ally that is at war with an enemy that wishes to annihilate it. It's astonishing to me. I mean, if she wants to stop the killing, what's Kamala Harris's plan for stopping Hezbollah launching rockets into Israel, like the one this week that killed more than 10 incredible young children, Druze children, from the extraordinary Druze community in Israel? What's her plan to stop Hezbollah rocketing Israeli children when they're playing in a field in northern Israel? What's her plan? I mean, I'd love to know. The truth is, I don't think she knows. One of the things, by the way, you can also always tell when somebody really hasn't studied any complex issue is saying banalities like, this is not a binary issue. Actually, parts of this are very binary. You're either with Israel or you're with Hamas. You either want Hamas to be defeated or you want Israel to be defeated. You either want the hostages to be returned and Hamas to be destroyed, or you want the Israelis to fail in their war aims. And so, no, sorry, that is binary. And if Kamala Harris doesn't think it is, perhaps she could look to her supporters, including the ones who were obviously enormously energized by her decision to skip the Netanyahu speech to the joint sessions of Congress in order to fulfill a very important sorority speaking engagement on the other side of the country. The people who took enormous courage from her stance and thought that history was behind them by turning out on the streets of DC, as I saw with my own eyes, uh, um, shouting horrible slurs at, among others, black policemen who were doing their best to guard the Capitol that day and shouting white supremacists at them, and then marching through Washington, D.C., calling for the annihilation of Israel and the annihilation of the United States of America. These people were burning the American flag on the streets of Washington, D.C. So actually, that is kind of binary. Are you with the flag burners or against them? I know where I stand. I wish that Kamala Harris made it clearer where she did.
Now, Kamala, as you mentioned, wasn't there, but you were there as Benjamin Netanyahu delivered his speech to the United States Congress. You were sitting there next to Elon Musk, right behind Noah Agami, who was rescued in June after being abducted by Hamas on October 7. Did you have a chance to speak with her and also tell me about why Elon Musk was there?
Both Elon Musk and I were invited as guests of the Prime Minister, and it was my enormous honor to sit there among the some of the hostage families, people still waiting for their loved ones to be returned, among families who have lost loved ones in Gaza, people who have had their relatives kidnapped and killed in Gaza, and also, of course, the remarkable Noah. Yes, both Elon and I got a chance to speak with her. It was enormously powerful. I mean, here was a beautiful young woman abducted from the Nova Music Festival, had obviously lost many of her friends, had been held for months in the most appalling circumstances, and was only released not through any act of nature or desire of and call of Kamala Harris or anyone else, but by brave members of the IDF who went into Gaza on an extraordinary rescue mission to rescue her and 3 other hostages some weeks back. And of course, a member of the IDF was killed in that rescue operation. She's a remarkable young woman. And, you know, it's just when we first saw that footage of her being taken away in absolute terror on the back of a motorcycle, I think many people fear they wouldn't see her again, but you know, she's a remarkable young woman, and she's back with her family and back with her loved ones. And I hope that happens for all the other hostages who are still being held and who the world seems to have forgotten about.